Thank you everyone for coming here today and joining our session, EUC 203, Secure End User Computing with Scalable Solutions for the Workforce. My name is David Rutter, and I'm a Senior Specialist Solutions Architect here at AWS. And I have some fellow presenters on stage with me here today. Jesse, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. And good afternoon all. Thanks again for joining our session. My name is Jesse Milano. I'm a Senior EUC Specialist with a focus on public sector.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin McCollum. I'm the CTO for Maximus, and we'll be giving you some information overview of what we have set up for workspaces.
Hi everybody, my name is Jason Winters, and I'm a Senior Principal Architect with Maximus.
With that all, we'll go ahead and get started. And today's agenda is going to be jam-packed. We're going to start off with some introductions into the AWS EUC services. We're also going to be passing the stage over to Kevin and Jason at Maximus so they can talk a little bit to us on how they leverage workspaces and introduced automation and scaling. We reserved a few minutes at the end to go over Q&A. In case you guys have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer those questions. With that being said, I'd like to frame today's conversation really with the elephant in the room and talk about the last 2.5 years, starting with the beginning of 2020. I think all organizations that we worked with, whether it's city, state, or county, or even higher ed customers, find themselves in one of these silos, whether it's reaction, return, or reimagine. And in early 2020, a lot of us found ourselves reacting to the pandemic to ensure that we had workforce continuity. Now, as 2020 passed us and we started 2021, we started seeing some changes, some improvements. And we even started seeing some of us return into the office. Today in 22, we're having in-person events today, which is great. But not all of us have had an opportunity to return. So as we think about that, today's session really has a focus on helping us reimagine how we can use technology to help us through these times or times like this in the unforeseen future. So with that being said, really like to talk about our mantra or our mission statement, which is extremely simple. It's enable end users to securely get work done from anywhere using any device. And with that, I'd really like to talk today on the workspaces and dive deeper on workspaces. So Amazon Workspaces, or DaaS, is a desktop as a service, and it's a persistent desktop offering. Now, simply put, what that means is that as a user, I can expect any changes that I make to my desktop or virtual desktop are going to be made available to me the next time I log in. Now, to put that into reference, if I have my family photo and my family pet as my desktop background, next week when I log in, I can expect that that desktop background is going to persist for me, along with any other customizations I've made to that desktop or any applications on it. The great thing about our services, or this specific service, is regardless of the entry point or the device that your users have, it's going to be supported. So a lot of us are a part of the Windows world. We have laptops and desktops that are running Windows. We can expect that those desktops are going to connect to our Workspaces service. We also have available agents or clients for our Mac users. So some of us are in marketing, some of us are graphic design heavy, and we're used to using a Mac. That is also supported. Some of us have developers in our teams, and we expect that Linux is going to be supported as well. Now, if I didn't mention your desktop of choice today, please note that we also support mobile devices for iOS and Android users. And if I still didn't mention your device there, as long as you have an HTML5 enabled client or browser, you should be able to use our service. There are several use cases where Workspaces really shines, and I'm going to talk about several of them today. The first one is agency access. Now, whether you're a city, a state, or a county, you expect that your constituents expect, to receive services, whether we're dealing with a pandemic or not. And so that's exactly what Workspaces does. It allows you to have access to secure or intellectual property from non-secure devices. And so what that means is if you're dealing with shipping delays or having problems procuring hardware, whether it's laptop or desktops, please note that we don't experience that problem or those shipping delays with Workspaces because it is a desktop as a service product. Now for our education customers, K through 12 or even higher ed, it's important for faculty and staff to be able to get access to that intellectual property. But one of the things that we learned over the last 2.5 years helping our K-12 and higher ed customers is that specifically for higher ed customers, college students, actually that are running some of our services have a higher average of consumption between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. And so we don't want to stifle creativity for these users at all. What we want to do is enable that and give them the services that they require when they prefer it. Which leads us to the next topic or use case, right? The ease of access. Whether it's 12 to 3 a.m. or it's the ability to use any device or device of choice, you can expect that those users are going to get to the intellectual property or the applications that they require. Great thing about when we do enable bring your own device or BYOD is that you don't have to mess or configure VPN for these users or for these devices that your IT department does not manage. All of this is great. Our AWS is known for the 5 nines of reliability or service. This specific service, Workspaces, is also backed up by a monthly SLA of 99.9% uptime. And if we ever deviate from that SLA, you can expect a credit into your monthly bill for that delta. What's great about this is that we also have a global footprint. So we realize that a lot of our customers are doing business or conducting business within the US, but they're also contractors or scenarios where states and even education campuses require contractors that are out of the country. And so you can expect that those type of contractors are still going to be supported through our virtual platform. With that being said, I really would like to invite David to the stage so he can give us an overview of AppStream 2.0.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. AppStream 2.0 is our non-persistent application and desktop streaming service built with the high reliability and security of the AWS cloud. With AppStream 2.0, customers don't need to plan, deploy, manage, or update any streaming infrastructure. AppStream manages the AWS resources required to scale your application to any number of users to meet your demand. And AppStream 2.0 is really secure by default. Your applications and data really remain on AWS, and only encrypted pixels are streamed to your end users. Applications that run on an on an AppStream instance are dedicated to each user, and we do not share compute resources. AppStream 2.0 is also deployed inside of your Amazon VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud. So you can leverage the VPC security features to ensure that your applications are secure and isolated. And AppStream 2.0 can scale on demand, and we support auto-scaling based on either a schedule or utilization basis. So you can be sure that no matter how many users you have, you can scale globally. AppStream 2.0 also allows you to have pay-as-you-go pricing. AppStream pricing is based upon user concurrency, and really you only pay for the streaming resources that you use, plus a small monthly fee per user. There's really no upfront commitment or upfront investment or long-term commitment with AppStream 2.0. And finally, really, you can integrate with your existing IT. So you can take advantage of your current Active Directory, your group policies, and security posture with AppStream. Now I'd like to just touch on a couple of the use cases with AppStream 2.0. So one of the main use cases really is to provide access to graphics or GPU-enabled applications on commodity hardware. It means there's really no longer, with AppStream 2.0, a requirement to have a GPU-enabled workstation or laptop for all of your end users. And because of the security of the non-persistent AppStream instances, you can utilize it to deploy a hardened and secure and scalable Bastion host to access all of your AWS resources. And for students, accessing a virtual lab on AWS really enables them to learn with real-world applications, so they're ready to enter a modern workforce. And we found that 90% of students already have a device of their own, and they'd prefer to utilize that device. So AppStream allows you to really accelerate your BYOD initiatives. And AppStream 2.0 also allows you to deliver online trainings, demos, and trials without having to rewrite your application. And to touch on some of the rich remote experience that AppStream can provide, AppStream supports multi-monitors of different sizes and configurations, and we support up to 2 monitors with a browser-based streaming session, or up to 4 monitors and 4K resolution when you're using the AppStream native Windows client. AppStream also enables you to use the popular peripherals that your users are used to today to be productive, such as webcams, USB devices, and tablets. And with AppStream, we do support real-time audio and video by redirecting the local webcam into the AppStream 2.0 session, so your users can continue to use the collaboration tools that they're used to get their job done. And with AppStream 2.0, you also have the ability for flexible printing options. You can print to a network printer or a locally attached USB device. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin and Jason to talk about how Maximus used scaling and automation
Thanks,
to deploy
sir.
20,000 users in COVID-19.
All right, so who is Maximus? We're a government contractor for federal, state, and local government. We help the agencies transform their services and policies into functions that change people's lives. We manage over 100 different projects and call centers for these public programs. And really deliver the services that are needed for those agencies. We process roughly 350 million calls a year across 100 different projects, and that's handled by 30,000 different call center agents. We also process more than 1.5 million health assessments in the US and UK. We also have 52,000 employees across the US in a combination of full-time employees and contractors. And with that, we have over 400 different workloads within Amazon outside of our workspaces. Now I'll give you a little bit of background on our VDI history and where we are today. So in 2018, we adopted a cloud-first strategy in Maximus. That was a monumental effort. Up until that point, pretty much everything we had was in 2 facilities and data centers across the country, one in Denver, one in Culpeper, Virginia. And since we're a government contractor, we had to do a lot of work with our agencies to convince them of this is the right path to go. We had, within that workload environment, we had about 4,000 different workloads that needed to be migrated. And with that was 3,000 VDI users that were sitting on VMware Horizon. And we set a deadline of January 21 to have that all sunsetted, because at that point we were in the process of migrating our 2 data centers starting in 2019, and we're going to be completely out of those by 21. Obviously, Amazon Workspaces was the next logical choice, because all of our workloads were going into Amazon, so to keep it together would be the right way to go. And then we were also able to prove that the workspaces provided the level of security that we needed to entice our customers to go that route. And then we had originally set a goal of 3,000 users to move in within a 6-month time frame. But then we all know what happened. The pandemic hit. And at that point in time, we had around 150 offices across the United States, and all those offices had to pretty much send their users to work from home. And the challenge we had is a lot of those businesses didn't have workspaces even functioning. So we had to really set it up from the ground up, where they had stuff in the data center, we had some stuff in Amazon by that point in time. We were a mixed bag of tricks, plus we had to backhaul all the traffic through our core network, because that's where our core security was set up. So we had to think fast and revise a plan to get us to the point of how do we make this happen. We had to accelerate the program, we had to move forward, and as we did this, we were also picking up new programs through the health emergency, so we ended up hiring a whole lot of employees as well. So not only did we move the 3,000, we added another 17,000 into the mix, because the rest of the company was going, plus the new employees we were adding. I'm going to hand it over to Jason to explain how we did this.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the architectural and technical decisions that we made to be able to handle a migration or a deployment of this magnitude. We initially limited the size of our directories to about 1,000 users, or a /22 subnet. And this number was chosen based upon a few different factors. Most important factor was having the ability to make changes to the environment in smaller chunks and not have to affect everybody in a big bang. Today we're actually opting for larger directories because of our automation, and we can put about 8,000 people in each directory for that. And this is due to the 50 directory per region limit, hard limit from Amazon that we're quickly approaching. We built CloudFormation templates to create VPCs and directories as required, as well as all the supporting infrastructure, like Route 53 resolvers, transit gateways, attachments to security groups. And these tied in with other scripted CLI commands helped us finish the final details of the Workspaces directory, like it's doing the MFA configuration and other directory settings. And that made deployment of these directories fast and efficient. An entire new directory could be ready to deploy, where new workspaces could be ready to be done in a matter of minutes. The internet egress is directed to a single egress VPC per region, using Gateway Load Balancer to place redundant firewalls in between the user and the internet. The ForcePort agents do URL filtering direct on the workspaces, and then all directories are set up for secure access using multi-factor authentication. The next step in our automation journey was preparing images for use as standard Maximus workstations. We first update the image with the latest patches from Microsoft, then install common tool software like Adobe Acrobat Reader, Firefox, Chrome, etc. And then also install software and patching and distribution agents, such as BigFix and SCCM clients. We have an automated Python script that runs on a management server that then moves the workspace to the proper OU and Active Directory based on the project-specific tags after they've been deployed. So Amazon Workspaces gives you two options for licensing your desktops. You have your BYOL, which is your bring your own license, or the AWS standard images. At first, we were really interested in using BYOL images so that we could take advantage of having a single image for both workspaces and our local desktops and laptops, and also take advantage of less expensive licensing. However, when we needed to scale these BYO workstations, to large numbers, we found there were significant delays in getting approvals because the BYOLs have to live on standard hardware or separate hardware from everything else. So you have to get approval from AWS to how many you're going to have there, and that just kind of ended up getting a lot of delays and getting things done. So we decided to just go ahead and go with the Amazon standard image and then customize it to bring it to the Maximus standard. Using that standard image allowed us to scale at unprecedented levels and adding as many workspaces as we needed in a really short amount of time. With the integration of soft phones into workspaces, Amazon's original recommendation for installing soft phones was to go ahead and install the software on the workspace host computer. And because we were intending to utilize users' personal computers as host computers, we decided to integrate the soft phones into the workspace to eliminate any issues with any conflicting software. And we found no issues running soft phone inside the workspace with either on-prem PBX systems or cloud-based SaaS solutions. I'll get Kevin here for a second.
All right, so I'll give you a little background on where we were peak and where we currently are today. So at our peak, we had about 46,000 workspaces running out at Amazon, and within that was about May of 21. We ebbed and flowed between there. At some point, we were a little over 50,000, and we ebbed and flowed back down just due to contracts starting and ending. One of the other things we managed to maintain is continuous development improvement. So as Jason referenced, how do we scale to meet the requirements? We were starting contracts up in 2 to 3 days and having 500 users on when the contract started. So we needed a way to quickly deliver that. And then also the other challenge we had during this was, getting hardware, right? So as users were going from home, we have a mix within some of our contracts where the customer owns the hardware, has to stay in the office, can't move anywhere. Then there's instances where we own the hardware and it was desktops. So it was really hard to pick that up and move it to home, which we did end up doing that in quite a few instances. And then there was projects that had laptops. But as we were bringing on the new contracts, we couldn't find the hardware. We couldn't find headphones, we couldn't find laptops, we couldn't get the hardware itself. So we had to come up with a strategy to move to more non-managed infrastructure. And today where we sit, we have about 17,000 workspaces currently running, and again, that's an average. Within that, we have 1,200 Linux workspaces running, and all that runs in 4 different regions on 80 different directories. We also have 30 different bundles and images that we manage and maintain. And then across our 110 business units, we have about 600 different AD security groups of ensuring that the users get into the right OU, the right setup, and they have the right network connectivity to where they need to access. So how did we manage this exponential growth? So I'm going to pass it back over to Jason to explain.
So as we started our workspaces journey, we were managing a limited number of workspaces that we had through the AWS console and native tools. As we grew in numbers, we knew we had to do something different to help us manage this growth. The first issue was provisioning workspaces across multiple directories and AWS accounts. We leverage Active Directory user and group memberships to control which employees are provisioned workspaces for different projects. So as we tried different methods of manually deploying workstations or workspaces, we found we were limited to a single build directory at a time when deploying workspaces for a particular Active Directory group. So this made the management of available IP addresses in those directories very difficult. So we had to closely monitor the 80 group sizes and break apart these 80 groups when they were too large so we could provision them in different directories as required. This was incredibly time-consuming, error-prone, and inefficient. Another issue that quickly emerged was the limitation of 500 grants per AWS KMS key, which we use to encrypt the storage of the workspaces. This quote has since been raised to 50,000 grants per key and will not pose an issue today, but it was really tricky to solve at the time. We had no method to accurately keep track of how many keys we were using and how many grants were being used per key, and workspace provisioning would fail if we used a key that used up all its grants. So we had to manage these keys manually on our side, and which further complicated administration. And finally, as we grew, we started experiencing issues with API throttling on our workspaces account. The more workspaces that we had onboarded, more efforts were throttled by performing describe calls against the API. So because of these issues and more, we ultimately decided to craft our own automation platform and management solution. By building something in-house, we were able to ensure that it would fit our use case, and we could also add additional functionality much faster than any external partner who has other customers to contend with. So we consulted with our AWS TAMs, and with their encouragement, we charged full speed ahead. There's several AWS blog posts around around the automation and provisioning of workspaces and creation of a self-service portal, and that's that link on the bottom there. So this is how we solve these issues. First, our automation platform does not reference specific directories to provision workspaces. Instead, we leverage tags on the workspace directories to group them together based upon their build pattern. So directories that align on security posture, access needs, build type, etc. Those are going to be tagged with the same type of category identifier. And those tag values then be referenced in our build parameters. For example, build details for an IT employee, AD groups references that those workspaces must be built in an IT-specific directory. And if we require more directories down the line to accommodate more workspaces, we just tag that directory with the appropriate category, and then it's immediately available for workspaces in those groups. Secondly, we completely abstracted the KMS key usage for our build parameters. Instead, we have a separate automation system that tracks a pool of KMS keys and their usage, and then can inform our workspace's provisioning automation, which key has the least uses so far. As keys are used up, we can just create more on demand and never worry about hitting that 500 grants per KMS key limit. Again, this is not a problem anymore, but at the time when we built this, it was very tricky to solve. So finally, we needed to tackle the API throttling issues. How do we look at all of this information at one time and keep looking at it without getting throttled by the API? So in hindsight, we probably should have investigated spreading our workspaces over multiple accounts. But since we'd already developed the deployment patterns and tag-based identification directories, that would have been trivial. However, even now, we're still able to keep this under control as we surpass 20,000 workspaces within a single region and account. We do this primarily two ways, and with our custom-built front end we call Cloud Factory. We maintain an up-to-date database of our workspaces fleet within an AWS-managed Elasticsearch cluster. As long as we keep that data current, we can query it as much as we like. Instead of making describe calls against the API. We leverage a combination of CloudTrail event tracking, targeted workspace describe calls for those in a changing state, and then a sanity check crawling in the environment to make sure that the data doesn't fall behind. For mutable actions, we make calls against our own API first, and our system is aware of all the workspace APIs called against AWS and makes the best attempt to batch up those similar API calls and then retry on the behalf of the user. So because of these abstraction tools that we've built, we're able to approach a multi-account workspaces fleet, and the perception of administration of those workspaces doesn't change for the provisioning teams at all. It's all under one interface. We can have as many accounts and workspaces as we need underneath it. So this is kind of a flow diagram that represents most of the bits and pieces relevant to our workspace and provisioning. Just to call out a few components. Number one at the top there, we have a DynamoDB table, and that stores the workspace configuration parameters for each AD group. So every Active Directory group has a set of parameters that are assigned to it. And each item in that table identifies the group as well as a directory category that it should belong to, and any other relevant data like the compute type, drive size, project billing tags, things like that. Number two is a Lambda function that has fed those group configurations. And what it does is it compares the users that are part of that AD group with ones that already have a workspace, listed in the other DynamoDB at the top there. So we don't need to query the workspaces API at all. Everything about the current configuration of all the workspaces we have are located in that DynamoDB. When the Lambda finds a discrepancy, it can create a provision or terminate job in Dynamo, and that picks up by the step function at the bottom there. Number three, by the time that the data gets to that step function at the bottom, all the decisions have already been made. So earlier Lambdas selected what directory or workspace should go in, which key to encrypt it with, et cetera. And all the step function has to do is fire off a create workspaces API call and then monitor that workspace for it to become available. When it becomes available, it sends a welcome email to the user with a registration code and other information that we can specify. So not depicted in this diagram are some of the follow-up steps that take place after the workspace is created, and depending upon the project that the workspace is a part of. Our workspaces are all tagged with a project name, and after the workspace is built, we have additional automation that will take that workspace and move it into the proper OU and Active Directory. And then from then, we'll look at things like group policy, BigFix, or SCCM to go ahead and take care of project-specific application deployments. So, some of the pain points. We did run into some challenges. After being able to ramp up to such a large number, our first pain point was core internet access. Our core internet access supported 150 offices around our entire MPLS network through two primary data centers, one in Englewood, Colorado, the other in Culpeper, Virginia. When we moved employees to work from home, that more than doubled the traffic in and out of the network. So workspace-related calls also increased by 500%. In the early stages of pandemic as users were moved to workspaces. This was a new service for them. They had trouble with the clients. There was all kinds of just things going back and forth. So there was definitely a huge increase in calls to the service center for that. The need for up to 30,000 laptops between April of 2020 and December of 2021. This included approximately 500 employees, 5,000 employees that moved to work from home that didn't have laptops, and an additional 25,000 new employees that were added to the company between 2020 and 2021. And of course, as Kevin stated before, supply chain issues made this quite a headache. Even getting headsets was a challenge for the quantity that we required. So in order for us to move that internet egress off of our current outbound that was coming from the data centers, we decided to move that to the Amazon network instead of just backhauling it. But we had to solve some security needs first. So we used ForcePoint on the end user computers for URL filtering, moved that to the edge computer, and also does DLP filtering. So with the movement of all that stuff to the edge, we had the capability to directly access internet from Amazon's egress point. And in doing this, we created a core set of redundant and load-balanced Palo Alto firewalls for traffic analysis and logging. With Maximus being a government contractor, we have many strict requirements for logging and that had to stay in place. So with 80 plus VPCs that had to be moved, we were able to do the moves in a systematic approach over a 2 to 3 week time frame. We could take each VPC and move them individually without affecting the traffic from any other VPC. So we pointed each VPC to an AWS transit gateway. From there, it would hit a global load balancer into a farm of firewalls within the security VPC, and then out the internet gateway to the internet. With our future being a zero trust design, we hope to even further simplify this configuration. Kevin?
Thank you. So the next step in this process was, Jason had mentioned our 500% increase in calls to the service desk So the next step was to fix the challenges we had with the calls going to the service desk because they were being overloaded as well. Jason covered some of the inner workings of our Cloud Factory. That was to get the users up and established. We expanded Cloud Factory to include workspaces. So within this process, we have an architect that built out the platform for us. They would show the end user their status of their workspace, so they didn't have to log into AWS and know where to go to look. As Jason referenced, it pulled it all from the database that we had built. It allowed the end user to reboot their workspace without having to also log into AWS to do so. Showed the end user their workspace ID in case they had to move to a different piece of equipment. You know, if their machine died and they were shipped another piece of equipment, they could quickly get back up by just logging in and getting their workspace ID. It also allowed the users to report issues. One of the issues we discovered as we went through this is you get different perspectives from the users of what the actual issue is. We utilize single sign-on in this process, and I will go into how we set it up within our My Apps. And then we were able to, in this process, eliminate our challenge of getting hardware by allowing the users to use non-company equipment, basically using a non-managed piece of a device so they can bring their own device and we can give them a workspace that's secure. So within our My Apps, we have a Cloud Factory workspace application link. And when the user clicks on this, it takes them to a portal. And in that portal, they have a couple things they can do. So if they click My Workspaces, it'll give them the detail for their workspace that includes their AD login, their desktop name, the OS that they're using at that point in time, whether it's Linux, Windows, compute type, what region they're actually in, so they can say, am I East or West? Workspace state, the last time they logged in, so they can see clearly, did they even make it to the workspace on their last login, especially if they're having issues. And then the registration code again, that's important in case they switch to a different device. So going back to the main screen, there's a couple more options they can get. They can click on the show, which takes them to the next screen and gives them additional detail. And within that additional detail, you get the IP address, you actually get their project name, you get their thin client token ID, and then they also have the ability to reboot or restore up here in the right corner. So this is where they can reboot their workspace, see if it resolves their issue, or they can actually restore it from yesterday's backup or snapshot. Going back to the main screen, as I referenced, one of the big add-ons we found once we really started getting into this project was all the calls going into the service desk. And the challenge is every user sees an issue differently. You know, they may say, hey, I had a black screen. My screen went blank. It went away, right? Just the basics. So we had to standardize it. And within that, John Farinelli also built in our report issue icon. So as they click on report issues, it takes them to another screen. Within this, we wanted to understand, are they currently experiencing the issue? Because we wanted them to fill out this form whether they resolved it or they didn't resolve it, right? If they're calling the service desk, they had to fill out this form first so that we could actually have the detail of what the problem is. So we wanted to know if they were experiencing it, and when is the last issue that they had, or when did it start? And then they also select, is it a black screen, is it latency or slowness, random disconnects, cannot access application or a certain URL, so if it's network related. We wanted to know if they had WebRTC issues getting to their phone app, or if their phone app icon on their desktop was red. And then, or other, if none of these worked. They also wanted to know, are they on their own non-managed device, so they're bring your own device, or are they using Maximus-owned equipment? And the last thing we wanted to know is ISP. One of the biggest things we discovered through this is we would get regional issues with ISPs, and we quickly created a database of where can I go quickly to look and say, is Verizon have an issue, AT&T, Xfinity, and we could see the spots. So we could quickly say, oh, this is a regional problem, let's not waste our time on troubleshooting, let's see if it's a commonality. So we wanted to know their ISP so we could quickly get to the resolution of if there was a regional problem, or even there was quite a few that were nationwide. So after the user hits submit, there's also some metadata attached to this as well, like what IP address are they connecting from over the internet. There's also data around their latency between workspaces and their PC, along with gathering the data to be dumped into the database. this is the Splunk dashboard that was created, and in each one of these weeks and down to the day and down to the instant, you can quickly see, you'll see some spikes on January 24th, for instance. You can see big spikes. We had lots of calls into the service desk, and we were quickly able to dive down, see if there was an ISP issue, see if there was a region issue, and this helps us get to a troubleshooting point where I'm looking east, I'm looking west, or I'm looking at ISPs, or frankly, I could be looking at a business unit, right? Depends on how the business unit was configured or set up. And this really helped us with incidents. And you can see some of the bigger issues for whatever day was selected at this point in time that showed up on the chart. So, upcoming Cloud Factory workspaces, one of the other things that we, after every incident event, we send out a survey and just kind of get some feedback from the end users. So, one of the biggest things is everybody get their bill and they go, oh, that person's no longer here, or a process didn't work, or we have workspaces that were unused. In the call center business, you have a 20% turnover, so people get through training and they never actually start work, and you want to make sure that you get those flushed out so that you're not paying for those workspaces. So automated removal of unused workspaces. We also wanted to be able to update the data with real name, email, and manager information. As you saw, that information wasn't on the original screens, so that you can quickly start correlating some of this data. We wanted to enable the workspace provisioning team to resend the welcome email. So when a user starts, they get their initial email, whether it's to their personal email or their work email, depending on how far along they're in the process. And it's only sent once. And as somebody's getting established and getting their workspace set up, the service desk is saying, hey, I want to be able to resend that email to them to whatever alternate email they give me. Also, security holds. So, security incidents happen, legal puts stuff on hold. We needed to have the ability to put a legal hold on a workspace in an automated fashion where it wasn't something that had to be manually done and we had to tag it a different way. We also wanted to allow actions for future, so like reboots, for instance. If a user says, hey, I want to reboot my machine tonight, but I don't want to do it and interrupt my day, they could actually get that scheduled. Also, a full service portal. So if somebody said, hey, I don't have a workspace today, but I want to work from home for the next couple months, a place for them to go in and self-service. Rather than today, they put in a ticket, the ticket gets processed, they get dropped in a security group, their workspace gets created, and they move forward. So a way for them to go self-service and really doesn't go through any of the processes or manual processes. And then as the team has discovered, they want to take some of the functions and the functionality they built and rewrite it from Python and into Lambda and PowerShell. And then the last thing is create a project level management for businesses, because today only the users can see their data. So all the screens that I went through, that's only user data. The user is the only one that can log in and see it. The managers are asking, hey, can I see all of my employees and what their current status is? So if they're unavailable, available, whether their machines are rebooting, because they have no way to tell but except for what the employee is telling them of their current status. So they wanted a way to see their entire group and see the current status of their entire group. So, remediation of end user support, the end of this is, as we implemented the Cloud Factory workspaces, calls for workspaces related issues dropped by over 60%. Because the users were actually remediating their issues and not having to call the service desk, but we were still getting the data through the end user responses, so it was very good. But it was definitely the addition of self-provisioning and self-remediation was successful. I also allowed the service desk to not have to handle the increase of calls, but focus on the real issues and lower their wait times and hold times. Also, enhanced end user satisfaction. The user didn't have to sit on hold at the service desk waiting for somebody to help them. They were actually able to help themselves. And it became a tool where their feedback and their surveys actually are leading to future enhancements. And then, the biggest thing for us is being able to use non-managed company devices. So almost every project we have today is utilizing the non-managed device build out first before they look to buying and purchasing equipment, because they can start up faster. The employees have a minimum requirement, they have a minimum home internet requirement, they have a minimum PC requirement in order to use it. So what did we actually learn through this whole process? There's always an opportunity to improve, right? As the team wants to go and rewrite the application, that's just an improvement that moves the ball forward for us and enables quicker enhancement in the future. Listen to your business units. Their future enhancement requests, they all come from them, right? We won't know that unless they give us the feedback. Respond to end user surveys, right? As you get data from the surveys, it's very important to correlate and find that commonality to then say, okay, I'm going to go remediate this. And then zero trust on the horizon for security, that really moves us even further forward of the opportunity we have as we secure the data within our network. And then to look for what's next. Additional options for workspaces like, how do we set up geo-redundance? Is there automated failover between regions? What advancements can we do, and work with Amazon to help us. And then look for opportunities to utilize AppStream more. There's definitely specific situations where the user may not even need a desktop. They can use the AppStream to get their tools delivered. And then the last thing is, one of the biggest questions and requests from the service desk is, I want that end-to-end visibility. When I get on with a user, I actually want to see live data of what is happening with that user right now. What's their latency? Instead of saying, hey user, I'm going to send you this bomb car request. I'm going to log into your workspace. What is your latency? What's your IP address? They want to be able to see that right out of the gate without having to go through all the tool sets and the time to do so. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Sure. Any questions?
Let's get microphones.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's right back there.
Thank you. The question I had, I know when you were showing some of the architecture build, you leveraged Gateway Load Balancer.
Yes.
And did you run into any sort of TCP session keep alive type issue? Especially knowing that you're going to be having a lot of workspaces that sessions probably have to be maintained, and I know that I've run into some of those before.
That's interesting. Yes, we did have a few times where we were experiencing some keep alive issues. I think what was it? We went to a.
Yeah, had to adjust the TCP session?
Yeah, we went to a different version or something of Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Got it.
Upgraded version
Probably
of Palo Alto.
one of the 10 dots, I suppose.
That fixed that issue.
Okay, great.
Yep.
The other question I had, the way you sort of showed your firewall deployment did look as though maybe you're using some sort of auto-scaling group. Were you doing some sort of single availability zone deployment? Because again, when I saw Gateway Load Balancer, I'm thinking you're probably leveraging multiple AZs.
Correct. Yes, we are using multiple AZs behind. It was a kind of a simplified view, but yeah, there's it's not an auto scaling group.
Okay.
But we have a specific number of firewalls behind that Gateway Load Balancer
And you
in multiple
have-
AZs.
Okay,
And in
great.
multiple regions too.
Got it. So that means you have multiple egress points from an IGW perspective, or?
Two egress points.
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
one for the west and one for the east.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep. Got a few.
Are you guys deployed in commercial or GovCloud?
Right now in commercial. We are moving into GovCloud though.
And then we also have international as well. We're in Singapore, I think.
Yeah, we have some regions, a directory of workspaces in the Singapore region.
Thank you. Next.
Thanks. Do you guys are you using one AD instance or multiple?
Correct. Right now, it's a single AD instance.
Okay. And do you have any requirements where you had, or is there an ability to stop the sort of cut and paste from the user desktop into and out of the AppStream instances?
No, there's no cut and paste capabilities out of workspaces. Yep.
Okay.
And there's no screenshot either.
Okay.
Right. Yep. Someone back there.
So for
Yeah.
Okay, so two questions from the infrastructure. I get why you have the gateway load balancer, obviously the load balance through the firewalls, right?
Yep.
But hypothetically, if you took that load balancer out, used a single firewall instance, where are you routing from the transit gateway? And then the second part of that, are you using multiple transit gateway routing tables?
Yes, there are multiple transit gateways. We have several, 200 something in different accounts. 200 different accounts that we have in our organization, all routing using transit gateway. So there we have several different egress points for workspaces. We have other egress points for other applications and things like that. So yes, there are multiple transit gateway points there. And what was your second question?
The second question is, if you took the load balancer out of the way, right, and you just use a single firewall instance,
Right.
Where is your routing table pointing to? In the routing table, if you want all of your other accounts of VPCs to go to the internet,
Yep.
in your routing table, the transit gateway, what are you pointing to?
That's a good question. I have to look at that one again.
Yeah, because I love to tell you, we're having an issue
Yeah.
right now
Okay.
with that.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I can get if you can get your information, I can get that back to you. Yep.
Hi. He kind of asked my question already, but I'm going to ask a different one.
Okay.
So the portal, so the Cloud Factory portal, that's the application your company developed, right?
Correct.
How much effort was involved?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you download the presentation later, that link in there has, that's kind of what we use to kind of jumpstart our into that. It's, the application runs on S3 and has the back-end calls to the Dynamo database. So the Dynamo database is really kind of the heart, that and the Lambda functions. The Dynamo database contains all of the information about our workspaces and is kept updated by these Lambda functions so that we don't have to, make API calls against the workspaces every time we're doing something. That's where that throttling piece comes into. But yeah, it was our engineer that developed this, John Farinelli, brilliant guy. He spent many months perfecting this, and it's in a constant state of flux, adding new things, just like what Kevin showed, all the new features. We have probably this many more features that requests for it.
Okay.
It's never going to be complete. It's always going to be ongoing.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So the follow-on question will be: is such a portal application absolutely required to take advantage of Amazon workspaces?
I would say it's not for small numbers. We found that when we had a small number in our first, it was easy enough to manage using the native tools. And there are other third-party tools out there that can manage, manage workspaces. We found, though, that when we grew to such a level of, close to 50,000 workspaces, it was almost impossible to do anything in an efficient manner. You could still do it. It doesn't mean that you can't grow to 50,000 and use the native tools. You most certainly can. It just becomes more of a scale problem where now I've got all these people using it, I've got all these people having issues, and I need to know where these things are. So and being able to deploy them quickly. That was our main thing. Is that when we had a new application would come online or a new call center would come online, and we would need to go ahead and deploy 5,000 workspaces today. It's a little difficult to do that in the native tools.
Yeah, we found out early on, one of the COVID contracts we signed up, we had to have 1,000 people online in 3 days. And we were able to do it, but guys were working around the clock to do it. And right after that, which was early in 20, we said, okay, we got to develop something that's going to get us to the point where we can succeed and move quicker. And that's when John jumped in, and I think the initial development was about 6 months for him, and that's all he did, was focus on that. But the good thing is we had a CDC contract later on that we had 18,000 people onboarded in less than 3 weeks. So without the automation, we would have never succeeded in that contract, ever. I mean, it was a monumental task to onboard 18,000 new employees in that shorter time period on non-managed devices, so the automation was key.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
The focus goes a long way.
Let's go in there.
Toward the end of the presentation, you were talking about AppStream. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it trying to replace Workspace with the AppStream, or are you trying to?
No, I think that what we're trying to do with AppStream is just try to find that fit. Right now, we're pretty much, we actually do have some AppStream that we are using today for a small little portal of people. But we want to try to find more uses for that. We've seen it's a very powerful tool, and we want to make sure that we're being efficient and utilizing what works best for what application. If we have a call center that's basically their application is a web page, that's all they do, that's a perfect AppStream application right there. Stream the web browser to the user, and that's all they need. They don't have to have a full-blown workspace to just use a web browser.
I think what's key here is finding out if your use case or your user base here, audience specifically, requires persistence. And if the answer is no, AppStream is an excellent choice for them so that they can get their mission-critical applications and/or desktop.
Yep.
So when you say persistence, are you talking about per user?
Correct. So a way to kind of to think about this is persistence is when I open up Outlook, as an example, on my machine and I type the letter D, David Ryder's email automatically populates, right? That's part of my customization. Yep. If I don't require that type of customization or persistence, AppStream is an excellent candidate for that user.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions? All right. Okay.
All right.
AWS is offering some additional skill builder and certification guides. So if you are interested, please feel free to take a look and scan the barcodes that are on the screen. Is there a question?
One more.
Over here.
So your end users are both internal to your company, but also like external, like contracts. You mentioned CDC.
Yep.
So your image for the workspaces, is that like STIG'd? And like to what extent did you have to go through to make sure that whatever image you have is approved for your company as well as your various customers?
That's correct. We do have, like I said, we had 30 bundles, 30 different images. Some of those are STIG, and we do have a separate whole team, the VDI team, that manages those bundles for us. And whatever requirements come in for a new contract, if they require that they use a STIG'd image, then we would do that for them.
Well, thank you all. And if you could, please take a moment to complete the session survey in a mobile app. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free. We'll be at the back of the room after this session.
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Thank you.